Hey guys, so if you're watching this video, I guess that you're here to improve your SAT reading score. A little bit of background, I got a 780 out of 800 on the reading section of the new SAT. So I do want to disclaim that it is easier, in my opinion, to do well on the reading portion of the SAT if you've been an avid reader all your life. I love reading, as you can see from the bookshelves behind me. So my tips definitely are coming from a point of view of someone who does love reading and who has read a lot. And I don't know how that might affect someone who doesn't read as much in preparing to study for the reading portion of the SAT. But I am going to get on into it. My first tip is to annotate the passage, but not too much. I have always been really big on annotating very detailed notes, and that is not going to be your friend on the SAT. Because you are under a severe time constraint for the reading portion and you got to get your booty moving. But you definitely should annotate, just very selectively. So for example, some of the problems will say on line 32, and you should read the questions before you read the passage. I'm going to say that again. Read the questions for a passage before reading the actual passage. Just skim them, don't get too caught up on really understanding what they mean, because some of them will make no sense to you because you haven't read the passage. But you've got to look for the problems that say like on line 32. And if that number 6 is a question on line 32, something about the word meticulous. What does meticulous mean in this context? I'm just throwing that out there. You should go to line 32 in the passage and write and bubble a little number 6 by it, so you know that when you're reading the passage to go to that question, and circle the word meticulous. And do this for all the problems. Usually there's probably going to be about 2 that reference specific parts of the text, or they might say in passage 2, and so just do big brackets showing that number 4 is referencing paragraph 2. So that way when you're reading a passage for the first time, you can stop and immediately answer that question, and then go back to where you're reading and finish. And keep going through the questions, because it's so much harder if you wait till you finish a passage to start going through and finding where the questions are. Because usually the questions want to be answered within the immediate context of the text, not like with the big view of the whole passage, just with the immediate context of the surrounding text. So that's a really important tip. The next tip is if one section of the passage is just really tripping you up, and sometimes when you read something and it just like doesn't make sense in your head and you keep rereading it and you just can't get it in there, you don't know like what it's saying, you just can't make that connection, that's bound to happen on the SAT, especially because they throw you with some tricky stuff. The history would always be something that would kind of clog up my brain, it's just so dense and heavy. And sometimes the science passages are a little bit harder, like if they go too much in the depths of DNA splicing and the genome, and you're like, oh, what? This is so much. Take a break. If you find that you are just stuck on this one part of the passage, move on. Keep reading the passage, the same passage, finish it, and usually just finishing one more section of the passage will give you a ton of tips for maybe why you were confused about something. And even if it doesn't answer all the questions that you can, do your best guess checking off the others and just put an answer down, star it, and then if you have time, go back to it. But if you don't, the really hard part about the reading section of the SAT is that you have to move at such a fast pace. It is so fast paced and there's so much reading. I think you have about 8 minutes per passage to read it and answer questions. I'm not 100% sure, so don't quote me on that. Definitely look into that yourself. But when you are practicing, I would recommend timing yourself. Ooh, almost fell. When you are practicing for the test, I do recommend timing yourself and maybe doing some simple calculations to see about how long it takes you to do each passage and what you need to do for a time length to stay on task. And again, if you miss 1 or 2 problems on the reading section, that is so normal. Like, it is so unrealistic to expect to get all of them right on the reading section, even if you are an avid reader. A lot of the times they are a little bit more subjective, and so that's where you have to use your best guess and your best approximation of and what you think the writer of the question is trying for you to get out of the passage. I do have a quick tip for the grammar section. So something to note is that a lot of the times the writer of the question is trying to get you to bring your own biases in and answer the question wrong. So if you get a passage on feminism, maybe it's on the suffrage movement or kind of more like classical first wave, second wave even feminism. I believe I did a practice where there was a response to a very feminist passage, and the answer was actually some sort of assertion that like women should not do XYZ, or they were beneath men or not made alike, and they're trying to trick you because you don't want to choose a question that says, yeah, women are inferior to men. But that might be the right answer because they're asking you what the author of one passage is saying about women, not what your own personal beliefs are. So you gotta watch out for that. They're gonna try to trick you. They're gonna try to make you bring your biases or your emotions in. They don't want your own personal opinion. You're answering questions based off of the text. So that's important to keep in mind. So practice is obviously key, as I've said in every other SAT prep video. So practice on Khan Academy. I've gone into that before. Khan Academy is the best. They'll tell you why you get answers wrong. Super helpful. The reading section has several different types of passages that they include. One is fiction. There's always a science one, and there's always a historical one. The historical ones are very dense, and the science ones can also be pretty tricky. Although I do find that the science ones are some of the most interesting. You can learn some pretty cool stuff from them. And there's also always a section where they have two passages and one is responding to the other. And they love to make that the history passages. So you have two dense history ones and one is responding to the other and you don't know what's happening and you're confused. Just do your best, and practice will help you tremendously with knowing how to answer and tackle those problems. For the grammar portion can be so freaking easy if you know your grammar rules, and you gotta know punctuation, capitalization, all that stuff. Khan Academy has some videos on that. I never practiced the grammar portion because I had a really great 6th grade teacher, and I'm just so thankful to her for that because I didn't have to focus on that. But Khan Academy has your back. You can definitely do a lot of studying on there. One thing I would like to highlight though is that what they do like to do in the SAT is compare words that sound alike or that are commonly misused, like affect or effect. One is a noun, one is a verb, and you have to know the difference. So you really need to freshen up on that. Another tip for the grammar section is sometimes the SAT will mark a little spot in the text and say, hey, we want you to add a new sentence to this passage, this paragraph, and insert it right here. Which sentence do you want to add? And a lot of them sound like great answers. But one thing I read is that they want you to choose the sentence with new information that adds something new to the passage. You don't want the same old stuff that's already been repeated over and over. But at the same time, of course, you don't want some just irrelevant information coming in. So you have to weigh that. That is definitely one thing to keep in mind that they are going to try to trip you up on. And if you are just like starting high school, or maybe you're a younger student, you really should read a ton. That's the biggest tip I can give you. Like the science articles, history, just like nonfiction, fiction, everything. And really like do the readings your history teacher assigns you. They're so helpful, especially if you know a historical figure and you get another writing from them in a passage. You already know their point of view, their tone. You have to keep that in mind when answering questions. What is the author thinking of this passage, and how would she or he answer the questions being asked? So if you are a younger viewer, definitely read a ton, as much as you can get your hands on, and as many various topics as you can. Really diversify your reading. The last bit of advice I'm going to give you may sound a little strange, but it's the most important advice I can give you. And it's that you need to pour every ounce of your being into the passage you're reading on the test. I can't say that enough. You're going to get bored taking the test, especially on the reading section, because it is so long and boring. But you need to stay on it, stay moving in a timely manner, and stay focused. It's all about stamina, so that's why the practice is so important. You need to treat each passage like you are going to master it. You want to understand that passage so well and just get the questions done and move on to the next one. You're aiming for mastery. Because even if you aim for mastery, you still are probably going to get a couple wrong. And if you aim below mastery, you really are going to get a couple of problems wrong. So this is where my advice gets a little silly, but I want you to play pretend. And I'm sure you're thinking, what do you mean by that? If you're reading the science passage on the SAT, I need you to pretend like you're a scientist and you're on the verge of this cutting edge discovery that's going to transform the scientific world, and all of it thanks on you understanding this passage and getting the questions right. Or if you're reading the history passage, I want you to pretend like you're the author of this historical argument or contention, and I want you to feel the emotions of the person's feeling when they're writing this, because a lot of the times these historical essays are super like emotionally charged and passionate, and you feel their passion. You put yourself in their shoes. What are they feeling? That will help you discern the meaning, and then when you answer the questions, answer them like you're the person who wrote that. How are they feeling? What point of view are they taking into this? You need to assume that persona when you're answering them. You have to do a little role playing, play pretend, get excited about it. It sounds so silly sometimes, but if you can think of Alexander Hamilton, and maybe you love that musical, and you're reading a historical argument about, you know, the Constitution or something, Jefferson's on there, you bring that to the table, you get excited, you get passionate. That will help you discern the meaning of the passage and get the answers right. Or maybe that's a little too intense for you. You can do sillier things too. Or maybe act as if your life depends upon you getting the meaning out of this passage and answering the questions right. Maybe that's a little bit too intense for you. Maybe you just want to imagine this fiction passage that you're reading is your crush's favorite and you really want to impress him or her. So you are going to get the meaning of this passage. I mean, the options are limitless, but really, like, connect with your inner child, play pretend. That is my biggest secret. That's like my secret weapon for doing well in the reading portion. You gotta engage yourself. Whatever you have to do, engage yourself and make mastery your goal. So I hope y'all enjoyed these tips. They're kind of untraditional tips, but they're definitely what helped me. The SAT is a game. I said that in another video. It's a game, and if you treat it like that, it won't be so awful to study for, and you can really bring that competitive edge out, and it can be fun. It can be really fun. So I hope that y'all enjoyed this video. I hope that I've helped answer some of your questions or ease some of your concerns about the SAT. You're going to be fine. Take a few deep breaths. It will all be okay. Seriously. So I hope you like this video. Comment questions down below. I can help answer them. And tell me what kind of videos you want to see from me in the future. I don't know, AP studying, I can help with that. Just testing tips for high school, how to get straight A's, whatever. I am happy to help, and I will see you guys next video. Bye.